Hearing that there now, yeah.
All right, welcome everybody to another edition of Developer Hours. Today we're going to be talking about an interesting topic related to the upcoming WordPress 6.6 release. It's all about editor unification, basically work that's been done to unify the post and site editors. My name is Nick Diego. I'm a full-time sponsor contributor working for Automatic, and I'm joined by my colleague, Ryan. Would you like to introduce yourself?
I am muted. It's my first day with Zoom, apparently. My name is Ryan Welcher. I'm also a sponsored contributor, developer advocate, sponsored by Automatic. Yeah, and I write code. I don't know what I'm saying. Anyways, moving on. Back to you, Nick.
Perfect, perfect. All right, we have a few announcements before we kick off. The first one, which is the most important, is the release of WordPress 6.6. So WordPress 6.6, we're kind of at the tail end of the release process. The release candidate number 3 will come out today if it hasn't already come out while we're here. And the final release is scheduled for the 16th, which is next Tuesday. So pending anything unexpected, the release of WordPress 6.6 will happen next Tuesday. And with it, the changes that you're going to see in today's presentation. Now, for those that have not been following along with WordPress 6.6, I'm going to drop a few links here. The first one is the roadmap to 6.6. It kind of gives you a highlight of what's coming in the release. And then if you want to test the latest releases, they post news articles on wordpress.org/news. This is the most recent one for the release candidate number 2, and it has all the details you need there to begin testing the latest release. Next, we always like to, because the WordPress developer hours is closely related to the WordPress developer blog, we always like to kind of talk about and make sure folks are aware of the WordPress developer blog, especially the monthly What's New for Developers articles. So I'm going to post the June article here, so you can take a peek at that. The July article will come out tomorrow. So these always come out on the 10th of every month. So take a peek tomorrow and you'll see the latest article that's kind of covering everything that happened between July 10th and June 10th. And if you aren't already, we like to shamelessly plug the developer blog, and there's a link there where you can go and subscribe. A lot of the content that we talk about in these presentations are accompanied by articles on the blog, and it's also a great place to stay up to date on what's happening in WordPress. All right, announcements out of the way. We're going to kind of dive into this topic of editor unification. So the best way to start talking about this is just to look at some of the visuals and the changes that are coming in 6.6. So I'm going to share my screen, and we're just going to take a look at a few of those examples. All right, we are in basically a stock install of WordPress. I'll zoom in on a little bit, and I'm going to go to the editor. And this is 6.5. So this is what you would see today if you installed WordPress. When we're in here and we're in the site editor and we go to pages, you can see that in 6.5, I have the ability to edit some of these pages. So if we go to, let's just go to the sample page, you can see that I have my sample page. I have some information about the sample page here. I click in and I can start editing things. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up WordPress Playground. This is a great way to test the latest WordPress releases. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to switch over to WordPress 6.6 RC2. So as of us talking right now, this is the latest version that's going to be the upcoming 6.6 release. And if I go to edit site, we're just going to kind of dial in on some of the changes. Come on, Playground. All right. Playground doesn't want to work. Let's go. Six points. See if this works. Playground is having some trouble. There's a backup option in a second here, but let's just see if this works. Might be something with the RC there. Okay. All right, we're going to bail on that. There might be something wrong with Playground. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a new tab, and we'll just use the WordPress beta tester plugin, which is another great tool that you can use. So we're going to go over to plugins. I have it installed already. It's called the WordPress beta tester. This allows you to test the latest version from a local WordPress installation. So we'll upgrade to RC2. And while it's doing that, I'm going to open up a new editor window in WordPress 6.6. And we're just going to do a little compare and contrast. So if I go back to my pages, let's just come back over here because I haven't refreshed. This is 6.5. This is 6.6. And you can see already that there's a different view. And you're starting to see, we kind of have a 3-panel view where we see our pages, and then we can click on each of our pages, and then we can edit. So again, let's go down to the sample page. Over here, we'll go to our sample page. Kind of similar. Well, when we click in here, you're going to notice all the different options for the sample page in 6.6. In 6.5, we have a few, but it's not as robust as what you see in 6.6. So a lot of the work that's been done is to take the functionality in the normal post editor and start to bring it into the site editor. Because you're starting to bring functionality from the post editor into the site editor, duplicating that functionality in code doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So the work was done to kind of unify the code base so that this panel and the code that's running it is basically the same as what's running in the post editor. So that's kind of why this unification is happening, because the site editor is becoming more and more powerful, and it's beginning to get to a point where it basically is the same as the post editor, but with additional functionality. Now we're in 6.6 here. So what I'm going to do quickly is I'm just going to go to the post editor. And if we go to, let's go to the pages, and we'll go to our sample page again. Now we're in the post editor. Take a look at this panel here. We go back to the site editor. You can see it's exactly the same. Site editor has some additional functionality that allows you to edit the template, but we go back and forth, they look exactly the same. So that's kind of the reason behind the unification work that's been going on. But what does that mean for plugin developers and people who are extending the editor? And that's what we're basically going to be focusing on today. Now, if you've ever extended the editor, you're probably familiar with slot fill. Basically, there's a bunch of different slots available in the editor that allow you to insert content, whether you're inserting a panel, maybe you're inserting a plugin option in the toolbar, that sort of thing. I don't know if you have it, you can find it, Ryan, but you have some great articles on slot fill. So anybody that's not familiar with slot fill, we can post some links there so you can get up to speed on kind of slot fill. We're not going to go into full in-depth overview of what slot fill is because there's so much resources out there already. We've already done past developer hours on it. But that's what we're going to be kind of talking about today, because these slots were unique to the post editor and the site editor. So if you wanted to insert something into the post editor, you'd use a specific slot from a specific package, specifically WordPress/edit post. And then if you wanted to insert one to the site editor, you'd use a slot from the package WordPress/edit site. Because of this unification process, all these slots have been migrated to a unified package that is WordPress/editor. So what I'm going to do quickly here is I'm going to share with you the developer note. So if you want to look at the nitty-gritty technical details, I'm going to put this in the chat. Here we go. So the latest link is the developer note, and I'll just open that up here so we can all see it. This is written by Riyadh, and it basically walks through how all these slots, and you can see them here. Zoom in a little bit. Were migrated into this new WordPress-editor package. So what that allows you to do, instead of, if you wanted to insert content into the post editor and the site editor before, you'd have to use 2 different slots. They were named the same, but they came from 2 different packages. Now you can do it with just a single slot that will insert it into both. So basically it really simplifies the extensibility process for the editors. And if you think about, like right now we're in 6.6, we kind of have this unified experience. As we march forward, things are only going to get more and more and more unified. So instead of having to do two things in two different places, you're now doing things in one place. It becomes less about what editor am I inserting content into. It's more about what is the context of that editor. Or am I editing a post? Am I editing a template? So it basically, before we had the widget editor and the template, the site editor and the post editor, all these different editors, that's all going to go away. And we're just going to have the editor, and then it's going to be about the context. So what I want to do is I want to kind of show you some simple examples, and Ryan will show some more complicated examples at the end, of if you had already implemented extended the editor using slots, how you would go about adapting to 6.6 while also maintaining backward compatibility. Because of course, these slots that are going to be added to the WordPress editor package will only be in 6.6 moving forward. So you need to come up with have a backward compatibility mechanism if you want to support both 6.6 and versions prior to 6.6. So what I'm going to do is just go through some examples. I'm going to start by going back to 6.5. So we'll go here, we'll go to our plugins. While I'm reverting back to 6.5, Ryan, are there any questions?
Yes, the question just popped up in the chat. Will the unification impact existing themes?
No, it shouldn't impact existing themes. It's more about if you have a plugin that extends the editor in some way. So technically, if you had a plugin that maybe had an extension baked into it, it could impact that. We'll see how. It actually won't change anything. Your content will still appear where you inserted it. There'll just be a deprecation warning in the console. But I'll show that in a second. But nothing should break. Nothing should change. Everything should still work as it does.
Yeah, I mean, WordPress still has its commitment to backwards compatibility, so they're not going to just pull the rug out from under you with the 6.6 release, but you'll get it. Your console will fill up with deprecation warnings.
Yeah. All right, so we're back in 6.5, and I have a plugin that I installed. It's called Developer Hours Examples, aptly named, I suppose. And I'm going to drop. Actually, Ryan, do you mind dropping the link to that in the chat?
Sure.
It's going to take you to a GitHub repo, and in the GitHub repo, there is in the README, there's a button that will open the plugin in Playground, WordPress Playground, which hopefully works. We just saw it's having a few troubles today. But what you're going to do is it's going to land you on a page that looks like this. And so what I'm going to do is basically just toggling this basically turns on the different examples. So just when you get there, if Playground is working, that's what you're going to see. The first example we're going to look at is just a standard post editor slot. I'm going to save these changes. We'll look at the code in a second, but I just want to show you what this does. So if I go over to posts now, that was a bad example. Let's go to pages. Okay. What this post slot example does is it adds a slot, adds my code into this plugin section of the toolbar. And you can see I highlighted it in green just so it's a little bit easier to see. We have it here. This does not matter to this conversation, but all this does is it opens up a little modal that allows you to do some stuff, insert some text, so on and so forth. And you can see here, edit post editor settings. If I go over to the site editor, that does not appear. And the reason that does not appear is because it's only using the post editor, only using the slot from the post editor package. So if we come over to the code that is powering this example, we can zoom in a little bit. Much of this code doesn't matter. It's just kind of generating the modal. What's important here is that we're using this slot called plugin more menu item, and we're pulling it in from the WordPress edit post package. And that's what I'm using here. And that's the title post editor settings. So if we come back to pages, go to sample page. That's what we're seeing here. The way we're adding this is we're basically registering a plugin that renders our component. Ignore this. This is how we toggle on and off these examples in the plugin. And it's rendering or returning this slot, and then that's spitting out our button. If you've worked with slots before, this is relatively straightforward. Now let's go back to our little menu here, and we'll turn on the editor slot as well. So now when we go to the editor, we see that we have site editor settings. Same idea, basically the same code. If we look at the site editor example, we can see that it looks just the same, but instead of edit post, we're pulling this from edit site. Up until 6.6, this is how you would render your content in both the post editor and the site editor. You need to use a slot from each one, and then you would render whatever you wanted. Use whatever slot you want, but you need to pull them from their respective packages, either the edit site, we go to post editor, edit post. With 6.6, we can make a change. Now, before we upgrade to 6.6, I want to show you what this would look like if I wanted to render content in both places, but without the new unified slots that we're going to see in 6.6. So I'm going to come back over here. We'll turn on the unified option. So now we're in the site editor. We refresh, and we see that this yellow one that says plugin settings, and it's the site editor. We refresh the post editor. We see plugin settings, post editor. It's a yellow. So the way this works is I'm basically pulling in the slot from edit post. I'm pulling in the slot from edit site. Ignore the top piece for a second. And then what I'm doing here is I'm basically rendering my slots, the same content basically, twice. One for the post editor, one for the site editor. This is a lot of duplicated code. There's ways to simplify this, of course, but it's a lot of duplicated code, and you can start to see why it's like, wouldn't it be nice if you could do this once? Well, with 6.6, you can. So what we're doing here is we're going to say, if this, I'm calling it a unified plugin more menu item, exists, because again, prior to 6.6, it does not exist in this package, but in 6.6 it will. So if it does exist, just use our unified slot. If it doesn't exist, use the old way of doing things. So this is a backwards compatible way of using the functionality in 6.6, while also making sure if someone's using 6.5 or 6.4, everything still works. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to upgrade to 6.6. I know there's a direct way to do this, but I always end up going through the plugin. So now we're going to upgrade to 6.6. And we're going to see that console error. So when we come over here to the editor, I still have, I changed this to red now. And the reason I changed it to red is because now it's actually pulling in this one. It's not actually pulling in the separated ones. So we've upgraded to 6.6. We're just using this one. However, my site editor one, this one in blue, is still being loaded. And it's using that slot from editor site. And so if we look at our inspector here, we can see that we have a console error that is saying the edit post more plugin, more menu is deprecated since 6.6. Use this instead. So this is where we're going to start getting console errors because we're using slots from packages that we really shouldn't be using anymore. But again, it's just deprecated in 6.6. It's fine for the console error to live there while your users are starting to, over time, migrate to 6.6. I don't, this is arbitrary, but I would probably shoot for 6.7 or 6.8 when you would finally upgrade your plugin's minimum required version, and then remove that backward compatibility mechanism. Just to see this in action, if we come over here and we disable these, so now we're disabling the old way of doing things. And we come here and look at our inspector, you can see that there's no more console error. And that's because we're using the updated slot. We're not using the old one. So I showed the same thing over and over again, so I apologize. But I really wanted to hammer home the point of, if you're doing things the old way, quote unquote, using the existing slots, everything still works. You're fine. But introducing this more unified approach, I would encourage everyone to start doing, and then have this backward compatibility approach to make sure folks who are using previous versions, everything works. The question becomes, well, now that I'm doing this unified approach where whatever I'm slotting in, whether it's in this little toolbar or one of the other slots that are available, again, there are quite a few of them, all these here. What if I only want it to appear in specific places? Because now this is appearing in both the site editor and the post editor, right? It's appearing everywhere. What if I only wanted this slot, or only wanted my content to appear in specific contexts? And this is where I'm going to pass it over to Ryan, who's going to show some more advanced examples of how you can use these unified slots, but then add additional conditions to conditionally display your content based on different things. So I'll stop there. Any questions before we move on?
There hasn't been any in chat yet,
Okay.
but yeah, I'll just leave it for a second if anybody wants to. Maybe I'll just share my screen while I'm doing that.
Oh, one thing while Ryan's doing that is I'm going to share you all a link, and this is our resource document. So we shared a ton of links here, but all these links are also in this document. So if you want to, and this document will be publicly available, so you can copy and paste there and don't worry about writing things down.
Cool. Okay. Okay. Well, I don't see any questions, so maybe I'll just jump into it. So I have a similar setup to what Nick has. This is a repository that I've built out and maintained over a couple of years. So I'm linking to a nested Sean M, I just linked it. Yeah. So I just pushed up a unified folder which has examples of what we're going to be talking about today. So this is there's a lot of other slots and stuff going on in here. So it's a big repo, but anyways. So what we're doing today is so basically what we want to be able to know is, where are we showing these things? And so I've got sort of 4 examples in place here. The first one is this zoomed in enough? I can zoom in a little bit more, maybe we can do that.
That's
so the first example is going to be if we only want to show this inside the post edit. Now, when I say post edit, I mean anytime you click on posts, you click on pages, when you go into to edit one of these, if you have custom post types registered, anything like that, that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the post editor. And so this is where context is starting to become important from a developer standpoint. So if we look at this, you can see that I've got 2 slots showing up here. Maybe I'll zoom this in. I have a unified post editor example. So this one appears only in the edit post screen, which is all of these things. So this one will appear here in pages. It'll also appear here in posts. You can see it's here again. And it'll appear anywhere that you have a post type, basically. So the way that we can look at that is this is the example for that. So you can see what I'm doing is I'm pulling in the plugin document setting panel, which is just an arbitrary slot that I chose. You can choose any slot you want. And what we're doing, so we're doing a bit of work with the data store here. So the first thing that we want to check, or what we want to get, is we want to get the post name. Custom post type always certain. Sorry, sorry, Sean has a question. Maybe just wait till the end of this demo and I think it'll become clear. So what I'm doing here is I'm getting the name of the current post type that we're on. Then I'm getting information about that post type, and then I'm checking for something called viewable. So viewable basically means if you have a publicly registered post type. So if you when you register a post type, you can set it to not be public, meaning it won't have an interface in the admin screen. And so that's probably the easiest way to check. And so if it's not viewable, I'm going to return null, and we're not going to render any of this stuff. If it is viewable, you're going to see our panel appear. So that's why we have this one that's appears here, and it appears in pages, which is great. But what if we don't want that? What if we only want to be able to show it, say, in a page? So we can have I have another example here where we're restricting post types. So what I've done is I've created, basically we're kind of doing the same thing. I'm getting, is the post type viewable? And I want to get the name of it as well. And so, we're asking the data store to give me the current post type, which is a name, and then we're going to get the information about that post type based on the name. And then I'm going to return an object of is viewable and is the name of the post type. So that's what this destructuring here is doing. Then I've hard coded a list of post types here. So this particular one will only appear on pages, but this could be other post types, or post, I guess. This could be CPT, whatever you want that to be. And then all I'm doing is, again, I'm checking, is it viewable? Because if it's not viewable, it's not public, then we don't want to render it. Or is it not in the allowed list? Or which is basically I'm checking, is the post type name in this list, in this array? And if it is, then we're gonna render it. So I'm just gonna save that, and we can take a look here. So if we come over to pages, we can look at all pages. I'm gonna click on sample here. So you can see I've got another one here. It's the unified restricted post types example. I'm realizing now that I've named these things horribly. So hopefully it's not too confusing. But this message says it's only going to appear on post types that are in the allowed list, and this is my allowed list. So right now it's just page. Any questions about that? Sean M had a question about what about a custom post type and only a certain post type, not all. So
I think you just answered it.
I think that's going to be the solution to your problem there. Now, like the way that I've approached it doesn't have to be the only way that you approach it. You just basically need to get some kind of context from where you are. It could be, you could get really complicated with this. You could say if it's not viewable, if it's not in the list, and then you could have some other thing, like if it's got a featured image, I don't want to render it. Or maybe it, there's all kinds of additional sort of like parameters that you can wrap this in to ensure that it only appears where you want it to appear. So those are the post types. The next one we have is stuff that appears in the site editor. So I'll go into the site editor here, and I'll just pick a template, for example. I'll grab this. You can see we've got this. I think that's the one I want. Done by. Sorry, not seeing that thing in there. So let's go index here. It appears on screens that are in the thing.
Are templates not viewable?
They should be viewable. Do I have some reverse logic? I may have some reverse logic in there. Sorry, bear with me 1 second. Those demos just start.
Here.
Live demos are the way to do it, So let's see. Okay. So I don't know. I'm not actually sure why that's not working right now. It should be working. Site editor only. So is viewable post type. Well, either way, let me just jump back into templates here. Patterns. My patterns on this. Okay. Well. Oh, this is the post type is. Maybe I have to go into the post type. There we go.
Oh,
No, did that work? No, that appears to be a post screen intent. Okay, that's weird. So but just ignore this particular one because we're going to look at it's exactly the same sort of idea. What we're going to do is we want to pull the document settings panel from the editor store, and we're going to render that. I'm not entirely sure. I think there's a might be a mistake in my logic here somewhere, but the probably the more important one anyways is going to be how you can restrict this on a per screen basis inside the editor.
before
Sorry,
you
inside the Mhm.
before you go on, I just wanted you actually showed something in the site editor which is very interesting, which relates to your restrict post types example, the one previously.
Mhm.
So if you go back to there, so if we go back to so we're editing a page now. So we're in the site editor and we're editing a page, and you can see that the restricted one that's restricted to pages appears. So we don't care about the site editor or the post editor. For that example, all we care about is the post type viewable and is it a page? So you can see how it
Mhm.
shows up in both the site editor when you're editing a page and
Yeah.
also in the post editor, which is
No,
cool.
it's a great point because you're getting to where you need to be, or like you're getting to the point where the place where you're editing, and that place where you're editing, you're coming from templates or pages, but you're getting in there. Okay, well, that is very strange. Okay, so anyways, the context one is going to be very similar. So what I'm doing is we know that like each sort of the templates, the patterns, and the template parts, they're all post types. So we're going to be doing sort of the same thing. Thing again, we're going to check to see is it viewable and is it in the allowed list, and if it is, then it's going to be shown. So if we go into patterns, and we now you have to be able, you have to click on patterns that you can actually edit. So you have to be able to duplicate them. So here's our panel that's only going to appear in a template, in a pattern, or in a template part. And we can just show how that works. So if you look at our template parts, we go to our footer, you should see that we have it in here because this is technically a different post type. Now we can remove that. For example, let's say we don't want to have template parts involved with this. Refresh this and we shouldn't see that slot appear in there anymore. So you can get as fine grain as you'd like to in here. This is very strange because this should be absolutely working, and I'm not sure why it's not, but anyways, yeah. So that's kind of it. The theory is like, is it viewable and is it in the list? And that's kind of the idea. Now, there's not a way, to my knowledge, yet to be able to get the context. Like, it would be wonderful if there was something along these lines, like context is gonna. You have to bear with me while I can't type. Select editor store, and it's going to be like get editor settings. Like that's made up. But if it was like get current context or something along those lines, that would be very cool because then you could just check that context against, yeah, am I editing? Am I in the right place? Am I in the place where I want this to render? There may be a way of doing this, but it's probably in the bowels of the stores. We have to kind of figure that out. But hopefully that's something that we'll have access to at some point in the future.
Yeah, I mean, there's like Ryan has here, like there's like ways to get the post type object and the name, and like there's also ways to like get the current user and their permissions. They're
Mhm.
kind of across all these different stores. You can also get all sorts of different editor settings. You just need to know where to find them and where to get the information, which can make things a little bit more complicated, but there's a lot of different examples across our demos and previous developer hours that have a lot of those different options. But and Ryan streams as well.
Oh, you know why this isn't working? I'll tell you why this isn't working. Because I have
Same plugin
I
name.
have same plugin name. Let's see. Live debugging. Live debugging. Let's see if this works now. I'll refresh this. And there we go. Okay, so it was PEBKAC error. The problem exists between keyboard and or what is it, user and keyboard or something like that. Basically, it was my mistake. So this is going to show up in any context of the site editor now. So I'll make sure to push that up to the repository. Looks like there's a question in chat here. Hi there, thanks for doing all this developer blog. I have a question directly requires experience curation. When filtering allow lists or disallow block lists based on view types, post types, current user, JS great option 3010.
Yeah, I wasn't clear on what disabling from the network meant.
You should be able to add those blocks. Oh, um, oh, you're saying, Maximus, do you mean that like if someone turns off JavaScript, that they'll be able to just register those blocks like in your browser? Is that what you're sort of getting at? Maybe I'm misunderstanding. Yes. Well, if someone turns off JavaScript, the entire block editor won't work. Because it's a React application and that's driven by JavaScript. But I to your point, I get what you're saying. I think you can just that JS file. I'm not sure if you can do that, but in theory, you can use PHP filtering for sure. Some blocks I think might only be registered in JavaScript.
Yeah, I think that there's a little bit of a trade-off you need to make, because I think that even in the console, you could enable stuff and turn stuff off. Like even if, for example, like if you turned off an editor setting, you could turn it on in the console. Like if you know what
Yeah.
you're doing to that level, you could mess with it. So like the question becomes like, I don't know. At that point, like if someone has that level of expertise, um, yeah, I don't really know a good option, because there are certain things that you only can do in the editor, especially when it comes down to like certain context-based filtering. So like when you're talking about curation, there are certain examples where like you can restrict options based on where a block is located. So like if a block is inside of a group block, like a button block inside of a group block, you could restrict the color palette or something like that. That only can be done in the client. And so, yes, that would be a curation technique that was introduced via JavaScript, and technically somebody could turn that off. I don't know. I don't think you can get to be that locked down, because there are just certain things that you can't do in PHP. If that is a concern, I would say focus as much as you can on the PHP based methods that are available. But like when editing, like introducing these slots, that all has to be done in JavaScript. So like even like the curation methods that we're showing about, like only showing in specific places, like you could add curation methods to these slots as well, like user permissions or post type or whatever. Again, it's all done in JavaScript. So if someone has the expertise to start messing with JavaScript or even writing JavaScript in the console, they probably can get past that. So I don't know what type of content necessitates that level of security where it is an issue that you'll run up against.
Yeah, I don't know if you're gonna have access to all the registered block type. Like I know in the past it's been like you can just unregister all the blocks, but then there's ones that are only registered on the server, and I'm sure there's ones that are only registered by
Yeah.
JavaScript. So it's going to be a bit of both. Yeah. But to your point, Nick, there's no way that you can just like, if somebody can turn off a file being loaded, then you're at the mercy of, and if they have the access to do so, kind of stuck. There's not much that you can do, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's like some of the examples that we show, like where we disable like block locking. We're straying away from our topic here, but I think that like registering slots and then curation are like kind of go very similar. You're using a lot of the very similar techniques, because you're basically modifying the editor. You're adding things with slots in these unified editor tools, or you're curating stuff, and it's basically very similar. A good example is like when you when you can lock blocks. And if you disable the block locking UI, if someone still has access to the code editor and they know what attribute applies to locking, like they can go into the code editor and start messing with things. Of course, you can lock that down. But I think that a lot of these curation tools and, restricting things to different places, most users should just go in there and they're using what's presented to them. They're not thinking, okay, how do I jerry rig this and hack it so I can get
Yeah.
functionality back? That person probably needs a higher user permissions if they're have access to the site and trying to do that. So
I think we lost your video, Nick. I don't know what happened there. Just
oh,
you froze for a minute. I can hear you fine. I'm assuming everyone else can hear you as well, but just a heads up, your video's gone black.
coming back.
Um okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, I don't really have anything else to present specifically. Like I said, I pushed all those changes up, so it actually works now. So feel free to go ahead and download that repository and play around with it. And yeah, yeah. You still with us, Nick?
Well,
Oh, there he is.
yeah, I'm here. I'm struggling with my video, but while I'm figuring that out, does anybody have any questions around, because this topic was fairly, well, we think relatively straightforward, but we wanted to do it today because it's important due to anybody that has ever extended the editor will run into this problem. Not problem, but we'll run into this situation with these slots being migrated over to the WordPress/editor package. So while the solution is pretty straightforward, you basically use the new slots and introduce a backward compatibility setup, or you just live with the console error until you decide to upgrade the minimum required version of your plugin to 6.6. It basically sets the stage for future improvements. And so it's less about like how to technically do this, because you can just follow the examples that Ryan and I provided. It's more about thinking more holistically about editor extensions and how they'll impact everything, post editor, site editor. And I think that that example that we stumbled upon where Ryan has the example where you're restricting it by the page, but you're using the unified slot. And then when you're going to edit a page in the site editor, that slot now then appears. Like that's like the key of why we're doing this unification, because you can just use a unified slot. You restrict your content to the context in which it should exist. And then no matter if you're editing in the post editor, you're editing in the site editor, whenever you're editing something with the correct context, that slot or that content then appears. And so if you haven't explored slots, it's a great way to start adding new functionality to WordPress, whether it's, I don't know, post level stuff and you're adding, I don't know, a UI for post meta. Who knows? Like there's just so many ways that you can edit the editor using these slots. And now that we have a unified way of doing it kind of across the post editor and the site editor, it really kind of like opens up the door for a lot more extensibility. But it also could highlight areas where we're missing extensibility, right? Like now that we're looking at the site editor and more people are using the site editor, you might be like, okay, this is cool. Glad we're doing this, but I need something here. Like I need to be able to add something here where you can't. So hopefully like after this session, you go and explore it and, test it out. And if you do find places where you want to add functionality, you can't, or maybe you're trying to target something, like you have your slot and you're trying to target in a specific place and you can't figure out that context, let us know, open an issue on Gutenberg, because the goal of this is to make the editor, especially the site editor, as extensible as possible. One of our primary mechanisms is these slots. And so if you can't accomplish something that you need to, or that, that's blocking you from implementing in either your plugin or your agency or whatever, as we look forward to 6.7, I know 6.6 isn't even out yet, but everybody's already starting planning for 6.7. The more we can get into the next release, the better. So yeah, that's my speech on that's my elevator pitch on why you should start exploring this
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah,
All right.
Sean M just said it's very useful. I used them to put some custom fields data recently. Yeah, that's a major use case. Like, WordPress's meta box, it loves its meta boxes, right? So now we can just add them as sidebars in the post editor, and just a couple lines of code. You're editing and retrieving post meta without having to install plugins. But if you want to install plugins, you can.
Absolutely.
You don't need to. So.
I guess I'm going to put a question out to the group and expand this conversation beyond just these slots. Has anybody been running into like extensibility, I don't know, blockers that are preventing you from accomplishing certain things? We have some time. We have another 13 minutes, so it'd be a good discussion to have, because if there are things in your projects that you're running into or you're struggling with, you have us for 13 more minutes, and we love to discuss those and think about how we can improve editor extensibility. And while folks are thinking about that, I'm going to share one more example. This is from, I think, I forget who, Maximus mentioned. I recently wrote an article about editor curation, so I'm going to share that. One thing I did not share in that article is I have another repository called Editor Curation Examples. Now, I'm putting the link in the chat. This is very experimental, but I've done some work recently to try to make it a bit more usable, because when you're dealing with editor curation, whether you're adding content, removing content, and you're trying to put it into a demo, it can get complicated because like multiple things are turning on and off at the same time. And so this little repo basically tries to simplify that. And again, there's a playground demo. I'm just going to share my screen real quick and we can talk through this. All right, so this is the playground demo. So if you follow the link in the chat and then go to the repo, and this looks very similar to the other example that I provided for the developer hours examples, which you see here. But this one's a lot more complicated. And it has a whole bunch of different examples that you can turn on and off, and you can check out the source code to view them. But to give folks an idea of how, I don't want to speak for Ryan here, but how I think about why I'm so passionate about editor curation is because the editor provides you with so much functionality, but there are so many cases where you need to modify it for your users, or it provides too much functionality for your users, and it becomes overwhelming. It becomes not what they're looking for, it's not what you're looking for, not what your client's looking for. They want a much more simplified experience. So the more that we can either extend the editor with new functionality that you need specifically for your clients or yourself, or the more that we can lock it down, the better. So this is a fun little thing. I'm starting to add these demos that are kind of like full kind of curation examples. So we have this one called Notes Demo. I'm going to save this. So now the Notes demo is enabled and you can see notes over here. So this is an example of like a super locked down post type. So when the post is loaded, you can see that it's using a post template. So it automatically inserts a list. So you can think of this as like a note-taking kind of post type. If you look at the list, there's only typography. There's no color. There's no nothing. If we look at our note, there's no ability to change the template. Code editor's turned off. We go to add blocks. Well, let me back out of this list here. We go to add blocks. You can only add these 4 blocks. So for example, if we go to image, there's no color, there's no background, anything. If we go to paragraph, all you can do is typography. So you can look at the code, take a look at the repo, look at the code. But this is kind of an example of how you can take this editor that can be perceived as like overwhelming, it's got too many options, and basically lock it down to your specific use case. In this contrived example, notes. But I think that this is really powerful, and it's something that as developers, we should explore and try to push the boundaries on, because this is what folks in the community are looking for. very specific use cases. And I'm just going to highlight some things that are not fixed at the moment. So for example, that's not what I wanted. I can go over here and click manage patterns. In this example, I probably don't need to be managing patterns. I probably don't want people to be managing patterns in this example. Maybe I don't want people to be able to copy styles or duplicate things. Who knows? Curation, you can go pretty far with it, much like the slots. I think that, not to pick on Ryan, but he has a PR that's been out there for a long time about adding additional slots. Adding slots is a very controversial thing, and rightfully so. When you add a new extensibility entrance for new content, it needs to be really thought through. But there may be situations where we need more slots, because these are the slots that we currently have. So I would encourage everybody on this call, you're all attended because you're interested in developer-oriented content, to really push the boundaries of both the curation tools that we have and the slots that we have, the ways that you can curate where those slots are rendered, and try to figure out where, push the boundaries of it and figure out where is it falling short. Because as we look ahead to the next release, my personal goal is to try to break as many of those barriers down as possible. So if there's something that people keep, now to be fair, there's a lot of issues already in the Gutenberg repo that are associated with extensibility. Getting through those and tackling those is also a priority as well. But when it comes to some of this new stuff, especially in the site editor, how can we make sure that the site editor we can fine tune it the best way possible? One of the things, just to highlight really quickly, one of the big improvements in 6.6 that carries over from 6.5 is this introduction of what we're calling data views. And that's kind of what we're seeing here. We can change this over to, I think we can change this, right? Thought we could see a grid view. Oh,
Yeah.
that's in the templates.
No, it was in there. Just the first one's
Oh,
layout.
sorry, list. Yep. So here we can see like the table view. We can also see the grid view. And this is kind of, we're starting to get to the point where there was a post recently, a couple months ago around, or a year ago, around updating the WordPress admin. And this data views project is the beginning of that kind of exploration. And so there's no current extensibility built into data views yet. But if you're familiar with the normal WordPress admin and you kind of have this list of posts, you know, you can add new column, you can add new content, all that sort of thing will be coming. And it just, because this is so new, it hasn't been introduced yet. But thinking about going through the editor and thinking about where you would want to add content, where you want to make it extensible is an important part of that process, because speaking up as developers in the community, your voices matter when these things are being developed. So, so yeah, long story short, encourage everybody to check out 6.6, push the limits of what you can do with both slots and curation techniques and extensibility, and figure out what's needed for the next version. That's my soapbox. Ryan, you got
Nice.
anything you want to add?
No, what he said. That's what I'll say.
Yeah.
There are some questions in chat, some statements and questions in chat. I'll start. Belinda was wondering, I wanted to have a completely different theme JSON for a custom post type that was added by a plugin and should look different for the rest of the theme. Managed to get it working in a hacky way, but was wondering the best way to do this. I think, is that sort of like the sections, the style sections? Is that what their thing's called? Styling sections? Yeah.
You can do that. Another way that's probably more permanent. So you can also, there's an article here on modifying theme.json data using server-side filters. And so this actually modifies the theme.json object based on different parameters that you might have. And so this take a look at this article. There's a lot of examples in here. And it uses it uses 3 different filters. One is you can modify the default theme.json, blocks, theme level, user level. And there's a lot of different parameters you can put in here to really kind of identify where the changes should take place. So this is a good one. There's also another one. There's also another article on client-side filters that might work as well. that might work for you as well. Another curating article on client-side filters. This might be a way of doing it. Right now, there's no way in theme.json to be like post type equals notes and then having like a separate setup for that in your theme.json file. You would need to use one of these like filtering techniques to do that. What Ryan's talking about with section styles is a new cool way to modify sections or like sections of blocks with, you can create different section styles of color and whatnot. Justin Tadlock, our colleague, wrote a great article about this. This is a new thing that is coming in 6.6. Doesn't directly address your comment about a specific theme.json for a post type, but it is a cool way additional way that you can change the aesthetic of sections of blocks.
Cool.
Anything
Good.
else in chat?
Sean M was asking about removing some of those panels that's not needed, like the manage patterns panels. I think that was the curation examples that you're talking about. When you were locking down your notes post type, I think
Yeah, so locking down
I think
like this
removing
managed
some of those panels. Yeah. So
Yeah.
like this, is that what you're talking about, Sean? I'm assuming that's what Sean's is asking. I'm sure he can see the code in that repo though, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure how to. I don't know how to do these, remove these. I'm not even sure it's possible. It might be, but I have not run into it because I can see how removing managed patterns. I don't know, even keyboard shortcuts, the welcome guide. Like, there's scenarios where you may not want this stuff there, but I don't think currently you can currently remove that. And we still also have full access to the preferences panel, which is pretty useful for people. You can modify user settings that presets these preferences. There are ways to do that. But in terms of like removing the entire preferences panel completely, I'm not aware of a way to do that. So
Yeah, I mean you can trigger that panel open and closed with the
yeah,
with the data stores. So you could do something like if somebody ever tries to open it, it just automatically closes it
yeah,
again. That would be a horrible user experience. Um, I know there are some things that are registered via slots for certain places, so you might be able to do that, but it's hard with slots. Specifically, one issue with slots is that it's very, very hard to remove just one part of something. So like when you register a slot, you don't register as the individual slot. Usually you register a plugin, and that plugin it registers one or more slots inside of that. So there's an API, the plugins API does allow you to unregister something, but it will unregister all the slots associated with it. And it needs to be, so it's hard to get access to individual slots in that sense. Like, so for example, the advanced query loop, sorry, not the advanced query loop, the regular query loop block it introduces things in the sidebar for slots or via slots. But yeah, so it's hard to control the order of them, and it's hard to be able to turn off individual things specifically, if that makes sense. Yeah, so some of this curation is kind of difficult to do.
yeah. And I mean, you could always write some JavaScript that like removes these, right? But like the goal is not to like come up with like a hacky solution. The goal is to have like a definitive method that's built into core that handles this.
Absolutely. Like there should be an API that
Right.
registers, and I mean there is. I'm sure there is. It's just not public, right? Like
Yeah.
being able to register and unregister and target individual panels. Like maybe you want to turn off, like some panels you can turn them off via like your post type, for example. Like if you wanted to turn off featured image for a post type, you could filter how that post type is registered and not show that featured image, and that panel won't appear that way.
Yeah.
But there's nothing like there's not like you can't pick and choose what panels you show from inside the block editor, or sorry, not the block editor, the post editor screen.
Yeah.
Anyways, I'm rambling now. So
No, and the one thing that I think that comes up a lot when you're dealing with slots, which is going to frustrate Ryan, but you can't define the order of
yeah, you can't.
so if you run into that and you start using this a lot and you're registering things in multiple pieces of content in the same slot, or you're dealing with your slot being inserted in places that core is inserting things as well, just know that the order, you cannot define order.
Yeah, and you can't control it re-renders either. I have a plugin that adds a whole lot of controls to the query block. And if you select it, then unselect it, then select again, there's no guarantee that my controls will render where I want them to. Sometimes they render below, sometimes they render above. So it's yeah. So there's some caveats there, right? Especially when you start adding a lot of things to the places.
Yeah. Well, we're past time, and hopefully our additional rambling was useful for some folks. But to leave on to kind of bring us back here, the slots that are being introduced in WordPress 6.6 hopefully will make things a lot easier in terms of adding content. You don't need to do it in 2 places. And we hope you all take a peek and give it a try. And if you do have any additional questions or run into problems, Ryan and I are always available on WordPress Slack or Twitter or wherever to try to help you through it. So thank you all so much for attending. Our next session, actually, let me bring that up. Our next section is a fun one. Let's see here. This one, it just pains me to write this because I am such a custom block enthusiast. But our next session is going to be about why you shouldn't write a custom block, and all the different ways that you can explore to not have to write a custom block and extend core blocks or use patterns or whatever. So this should be a really fun one. It's going to be on July 23rd, which is a Tuesday, same time, 1500 UTC. So we hope you all join us then. The recording for this session, as well as the resources, will be posted on WordPress TV and YouTube if you're watching this after the fact. And the notes will be in the session, the video comments, sorry, after the fact. And we hope to all see you in the next one. Have a good day.
Thanks, everyone.